Hmong-ish is a podcast produced by Hmong American Media and sponsored by Hmong Organizing for Progress and Empowerment Center, or the Hope Center, along with Culture Through Cloth.
I'm your host, Shoun.
And I'm your host, Pachia. And we are
Hmong-ish. So Hmong-ish is a podcast where Pachia and I share our thoughts on anything and all things Hmong, diving into our own personal experiences and what it means to be Hmong American and Hmong in today's time.
Yeah. So what are we discussing today, Shoun?
Today, we are actually going to talk about our travels to China. So
Yeah.
Pachia and I, we've done extensive traveling to China and other countries, and, you know, we've been blessed to just visit the Hmong culture and people there. And so, you know, I think it's some sort of experiences that we felt we could share with everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big part of who we both are, right? And our expertise, as you want to call it, being Hmong people and having
no PhD, though.
no PhD yet. But, yeah, we've both been to China, and so we thought it'd be pretty cool if we could talk about our experiences and our takeaways and China in general in relation to like us as Hmong people and Hmong history.
Yeah, just some general facts about China. You know, China has the largest population in the world. If you don't know that, China is located in East Asia. There's 56 nationalities in China. They call them, that means ethnic groups. There's 56 nationalities. Han Chinese being the largest, the Zhuang being the second largest, and you don't know, Hmong, we are actually the third largest, and we are under the umbrella Miao.
I didn't even know that we were the third largest.
Yeah, so we're actually the third or fourth.
Crazy. The Miao are the third largest ethnic group or nationality in China.
Yes.
Wow.
But that's minor in comparison to the Han Chinese. There's probably 13 million Hmong people in the world.
10 million in
about
China.
10 million in China.
Yeah.
How do we fit into China? Well, we came from China. So we migrated from China. That was our exodus. And then we went to Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and now we're here in the United States. And, you know, we're in Australia, France, Argentina, South Africa, Israel. We're all over the world, Japan. So when did we migrate out of China? I think, you know, for the Hmong people, a lot of us, we migrated out of China about 300 years ago, 400 years ago.
Our ancestors.
Yeah, our ancestors. The largest exodus was in the 1800s, you know, during the Opium Wars in China. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of rebellion. And so that's how a lot of us ended up in Laos. So where is the most populous, where Hmong people live now in China is, you know, in the western regions, southwest regions, provinces like Hubei, Hunan, Guizhou, Sichuan, Guangxi, and Yunnan. You know, those areas have the largest concentrations.
So southwest China.
So southwest China.
Yeah.
In Guizhou, we might be one of the population there, and we have so many villages, so many cities there that
beautiful villages too, by the way.
Just largely populated by the Hmong people, and they've lived there for thousands and thousands of years.
Our history is thousands and thousands of years old.
So it's very, very interesting. Like you know, we are considered like a sister or brother civilization or a culture to
a sibling civilization.
I don't know, how do you call it? Like we're considered equal to like the Chinese civilization. Like we were there when they were there.
Yeah.
Like you know, we existed when they were there.
Yeah.
We weren't prominent, but we were always there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we therefore we could say that we have what do you call it? Like when we're old civilization. Like and it's not that we're this new minority that just broke off from another civilization. Like we've always been there.
So I mean that's really interesting because growing up, like I never really considered my identity that much in relation to China, and maybe in some ways I did, but I didn't realize it because I never really thought of myself related to China in any ways. I always thought of myself as Hmong and therefore not Chinese.
Me too. Like prior to 2008, after my first trip before my first trip to China, I grew up saying I'm Southeast Asian, I'm Hmong, and we're not Chinese, and we have no relations to China. Like staunch belief in that, and saying, and say, so until I visited China in 2008, and it was just different. Like you go there, and then you find out, this is a joke. Like the Chinese kids didn't want to talk to me because they're like, "Oh, you're Hmong, you're Chinese." I was like, "What?" And they went and talked to all the white kids. I was like, "I'm an American, okay? I'm Hmong. I'm not Chinese." But
you mean growing up?
No, in 2008 when I went to China. First time when I visited China. Because it was part of like the Sister City exchange program, right? So a bunch of high schoolers in Sacramento, we were selected to travel together. So I went with folks from St. Francis, Christian Brothers, all private schools.
Yeah.
And I was the only one from public high school, like public school that went. And, there was a whole bunch of white kids. And like when we were doing like the student exchange, all the Asian students, like Chinese students that we were talking with, they went and befriended the white kids, and like they didn't talk to me, they didn't talk to my friends.
They're like, you look just like us, so whatevs.
They didn't even talk to my friends who were Latino or African American.
Oh,
or
really?
Me, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was 2008, so this is when China was beginning to open up to the world. It was during the Beijing Olympics. Yeah,
I was gonna say the Beijing Olympics.
And I just blew my mind. And then they're like, "Oh, you're Asian," and then they're like, "What are you?" And I was like, "I'm Hmong." They're like, "What Hmong?" And you're like, "Miao." And then they're like, "Okay, you're Chinese. We don't need to talk to you. We know you already."
And like, you're a minority, whatever.
Yeah. I'm like, what? No, this is not true. That didn't pique my interest in China because I was like, why do they just see me as like a normal Chinese person?
Well, I think like for me, like it's super interesting because we have so much of our history in China that is actually, I feel as a Hmong American, inaccessible to me because I don't speak Chinese, because I don't read Chinese, because China is so foreign to Americans. And I know you have a different like relationship because you speak Chinese, you read Chinese, but to me, I was just fascinated at like all of this history. We always talk about like reconnecting with our roots and understanding ourselves more as Hmong people, but it's like it's so much further than just Laos and the Secret War. Like it goes far beyond that. And as just an everyday Hmong person, like, there's still so much I want to learn about it. And so, like, that's kind of something that I want, like, our listeners to be thinking about as well, right? Is our connection to China and
our roots go way further than Laos because just talking to your parents or your grandparents who are still alive and they'll tell you like, oh, we live in this villages, but our great-grandpa said we come from this region from China. And you're like, wait, can you they would mention like a weird word and you'll be like, okay, I gotta find where this place is, and trust me, you can't find it. I've tried it.
And the thing is, so many not to cut you off, but like so many of our language also is rooted in the landscape of China. That like those stuff we don't understand, it's because we've never seen or like we just don't have context to understand it.
Yeah. So when they say they lia they jua,
exactly.
They say like dog no or
that's actually
a place.
Those are real places
in Vietnam.
Yes, in Vietnam,
where it snows,
where people travel, like where they had to migrate and cross from China into Southeast Asia.
It's like a high mountain range area, and it snows.
You can actually go there. Although I wouldn't recommend it because people are afraid to go to those places. That place particularly.
Yeah, and so it was a migration route, and that's why they call it that way. And you're like, wow, these stuff actually exist.
It's sad.
Yeah, and so like that's always piqued my interest is to go beyond Laos, right? And
beyond Laos.
That's why I study Chinese. I study Chinese history.
Would you say they have a lot of good translations for Chinese text into English?
Yeah, I think Google does a really good translation now. I think like sometimes when you read, you could the modern simplified Chinese, Google does a good job translating it. The hard part is when you look at what they call sources, right? Where in Chinese, sometimes sources, you only get like 4 characters or 5 characters. That actually means a long thing. And you just can't translate that. You literally have to know what they're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're saying to do literal translations of books?
Yeah, literal
Not necessarily that books are translated already.
No, books are not translated.
Okay, so we would have to manually translate this stuff.
Yeah, you have to manually
Crazy.
translate a lot of sources out there, and a lot of new research. I think China being the way it is now, there's so much more research on, like Hmong history, Hmong culture. Like in college, right? They told me that this area probably don't have Hmong people like Chu, right? Hmong the Chu Cha, which is the Chu state in the spring and autumn period of the Zhao dynasty, right? And Zhou dynasty. And, they broke up into like this 8 states, and there's this Chu state. And they're like, Hmong people keep saying, Chicha is a Hmong state, Chicha is a Hmong state. When I was in college, my professor was like, no, it's a Chinese state, it's not a Hmong state. But then, like, you read scholars that Hmong Chinese are writing now, and they're like, in the tome of Ma Wing more Daking, more Lu Nong Yong, and all that. And you're like, wait, that's Hmong. But when you go to, like, the Western perspective, the Eastern perspective from the Chinese scholar, they're like, no, it's not Hmong. So there's just, like, a lot to uncover out there. You're like, okay, what's right, what's not right? Like, these people live in China, they're Hmong scholars, and they're claiming this. Mm-hmm. So are they just blowing smokes, or is it real? And it's interesting. Like,
so fascinating.
I'm a nerd, so I
That's
like
super
reading.
fascinating stuff.
So when and why did you travel to China?
Well, I love having conversations with you about China, first off, because there's so much more to learn. And just with what you said, I was like, ooh, we got to talk more about that. I need to write this down so I can do my research too. Such interesting stuff. But I actually went to China because of you. Thanks.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So when I went abroad to study or to work in Laos, you guys went on your trip and you invited me to go on that first trip to Yunnan. And then luckily I also got invited. I would have to say I want to thank Hmong Story 40. If y'all don't know, check it out, Google it, because I met a lot of really great Hmong people through that project. So I met you, and I met Noah Vang also, who was the curator of the We Are Hmong exhibition, and they had invited me to go on a second trip. And so back in 2017, when I was working in Laos, it just all worked out really well. And I got to go on my first trip, 2 trips, like one after the other, with you to do that trip to Yunnan, which you can talk more about. And then on a second one to Guizhou, because they had an international, they did like an international, like Hmong group for their New Year's in Laoshan in Guizhou. And we were part of the parade, so there were Hmong people from all throughout the world, like Australia, France, Thailand, the U.S., and we got to come together and meet each other and see how the Miao, the Mu in Laoshan celebrate, and we were considered like Miao alongside them. So those were my 2 first trips. And then, actually, the next year, I got a grant to go and travel to learn more about Bandao. So I decided to go back to Patala, which was where we went, and we can talk more about that in a bit. But I went outside of the tour group by myself, and I crossed the Red and Green Rivers, if you know. I always thought those 2 things were just like fairy tale talk that the elders like talk about, and they're just like fairy tale places like in your mind.
Green River.
Yeah, like okay, Red and Green River. Yeah, and if you don't understand, like take a look at a story cloth, like those big ones. You'll see a red and a green river that Hmong people cross out of China. Yeah. But those are real rivers. And they actually the Chinese bordering Vietnam. That border is split right by the river. Yeah, the river is the border. Yeah. So I went up through Dalia, yeah, and then really nearby is the Green River. And it's called Red River. And so it's not just like a fairy tale term. It's really called Red River. Yeah. And so I crossed that river, and then I was in the Red River district. And Kumunji, Hmong Delia, right? The Red River Hmong people who cultivate a lot of bananas and corn. And I got to visit like the smaller towns like Ma Guan, which was very interesting, and Pingbien, which was really interesting. Pingbien is like this magnificent Hmong city. It's not just Miao, it's Hmong because Hmong Yunnan. And so it was a Hmong city, and the architecture was all Hmong. There were Hmong statues of Hmong people wearing Hmong clothes. Like, it was really cool. I was like, we always talk about not having a place, right? But I went there and I was like, this is a place we can call our own. This is a Hmong city. It's not just a village. It's literally a developed city.
And people don't know, like, in China, I said this, and they're like, oh, he's boasting Chinese policies, but it's weird because in China they give us autonomous region. Like, there's literally Miao and Puyi, or Miao and Zhuang, Miao and Yao. Autonomous regions. So, like, they're not just area. They're all Hmong. And, like, the policies there, they could redirect everything to serve the region. So, I guess it's like we have what they call reservations here, but it's different, too, because it's not reservations where they tell the Hmong people to go live in certain areas only. It's literally the city, like the city and the county. So, like, for example, Sacramento County, we consider a Hmong autonomous county. Like, for example, in China, they have, like, certain policies like that. And then it does state that, okay, why do they do it? And it does tell me that, okay, because maybe we are indigenous to China. That's why.
Yes, we are. That's right.
Because that's the biggest argument that I go
we
through.
We are indigenous to China.
Are we indigenous to China?
I'm sorry, I'm saying that because we've had many conversations about indigeneity, right? So.
Or are we indigenous to Southeast Asia? Like that's the biggest.
No, we are indigenous to China. The areas, the land in China.
Yeah.
Before it was called China, so it's yeah.
Yeah, so that's Pachia and I, we go on.
We go on about we talk about that.
Do we even call it indigenous because that's the Western terminology? You know, like in the Eastern terminology, they don't use indigeneity.
And indigenous isn't really used in Asia because
they don't use race; they use nationality.
Because Asians were colonizing Asians,
yeah.
So they're all indigenous to Asia. But you know, we're talking about smaller groups of people who have been colonized.
Yeah. So for me, I talk about my travels too. I went to China in 2008 when I was a high school student, and it was a game changer. It was right before China opened to the world, the Beijing Olympics. You know, before that, China was considered like a secluded nation. And you know, the world economy, World Bank. I mean, a lot of
so that's only a decade ago.
Yeah, 20 years now, almost 15 years.
15.
Yeah. And so, and then that piqued my interest. So when I got back, I went to college. I decided I'm going to study Chinese because my degree was in history. I wanted to do race in America. You know, I grew up in low-income neighborhood, Del Paso Heights. I wanted to study, you know, dynamics between blacks, Latinos, Asians, and Americans. And then going to China was like super foreign. I was like, okay, I want to be interested in Chinese history too, because I'm Hmong, and you know I gotta find where we come from. And so I study abroad again, I studied abroad in 2010 in China, and so I did. It's like art history, so we studied art history, and I was brave. I was young. I was 20 years old, and I was dumb, because I was like, I'm gonna take 2 weeks out of the whole semester. I'm just gonna go find Hmong people in Yunnan, and so. After that whole...
Why do you say you were young and dumb?
Because who would do that? Who would just go and say...
A young and dumb person? We need more young and dumb people who aren't afraid to do stuff. So, now we're old and we would never do those things.
Right? And looking back, you're like, no, I need to know people. They need to come pick me up there.
That's how I was. Like, hey, random person's picking me up. I don't know where they're taking me.
It's like, okay, I just met you through phone call and social media, but I'm Hmong, you're Hmong. Will you come pick me up?
Take me wherever.
Yeah.
Just don't kill me.
And so I spent 2 weeks, you know, I landed in Kunming. They came and picked me up. We got there, and then I figured out the guy who picked me up, he was, and he just, and I was like, you know, culturally that's wrong. And I was like, I had to find somebody else to take me around. And
so you didn't accept his help because he still had a baby?
Yeah, and it was just culturally wrong to be in his one-bedroom house.
So for those who don't speak Hmong, his wife had just had a baby.
Yeah.
And the baby had not become a month.
And so, you know, it's really to protect that baby, and culturally, they had to stay in seclusion for a month. And so I didn't want to embark on that. And so he introduced us to another friend, and she and her daughter took me around with another friend that I met through the trip. And, you know, we that was my first time in Patala, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. Like the city is huge. It's not like the movies. It's not. I mean, I'm not talking about like first world city, but I'm just saying it's a big. Yeah, it's a big Chinese city or a big Hmong Chinese city, and you realize, okay, there's more than what you know. I thought we were just gonna live in thatch houses and all that.
Did you ever go and just like talk to people in Hmong on the streets?
I did. I actually
when we were there, I was almost wondering, like, can I just start talking to someone in Hmong?
So my first trip, I was very young and dumb, right? I went 3 days. 3 days. I went to Chilpei. Remember Chilpei, the province? So 3 days, I went there and I lived with this old Hmong guy in a village.
Yeah.
And he was growing tobacco because that was their cash crop during their time. A lot of the Hmong area there, they grew tobacco for money, for Chinese companies. And I lived with him for 3 days, and it was just me and a lot of Hmong old men, and I just lived with them, like, and did all that in the countryside. And I was like, wow.
Your anthropology days. I'm just kidding. Anthropologist, Shoun.
I was like, I spent 3 days with them, and it was crazy. I was scared to take a shower, so
Why?
I just washed myself for 3 days because the water was unsanitary.
Oh,
I could literally see stuff floating.
Oh, were they just using like river water?
Yeah, and well water. Yeah,
goodness.
But then.
Yeah, their river system is not very.
It's changed now. This was 2010, so yeah.
When I went in 2018, the Green River was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you could their sewage just connects straight to the river. Yeah.
Yeah. So now a lot of things changed. Like and then not to do so much of my travels, and then in 2012 I was like, okay, I've seen China. I want to see Taiwan. So I studied a semester abroad in Taiwan.
Oh, so you did 2 study abroads?
Yeah. Nice. So and then I was
How long did you spend in each place?
2 months.
2 in China, 2 in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then 2010 and 2012. So it's like 2 years apart.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, I'm done with China. Graduated college. I was like, I'm not going to grad school. It's too expensive. And then I came back and I was like, okay, I'm working for my community. So I worked for politics. I worked for a politician, and I was his council representative. And he was like, one of my promises, Shoun, was that I want to meet your people. And you've done extensive traveling. Let's coordinate some trips where we can learn about the Hmong culture. And I was like, cool. I have a boss who's really invested in the Hmong people. So I planned a trip to Laos, China, and stuff again. And then after our trip to Laos, then a lot of Chinese folks and Sacramento, they're like, oh, your boss likes to travel, let's go to China. And so during that time, we were building the Golden One Arena in the city of Sacramento, and my boss was the chair of the Entertainment and Sports Complex. We called it Entertainment and Sports Complex because before it was named Golden One Arena. And so he was the chair, and I was assisting him in that. And so we were meeting a lot of Chinese investors and stuff that was coming. And then in the city of Sacramento, we actually have a trade city with the city of Chongqing. And the city of Chongqing has Hmong people who lives there too. You don't know because Chongqing is in Hubei, but it's its own municipality. Hunan or Hubei, one of those provinces. I tend to forget because I'm not an expert. And then we went there. So in 2015, we went to Chongqing, China, and I got to go there and meet the Chinese officials and all that. And then that was just purely city and Sacramento, nothing to do with the Hmong community. But, it was quite an experience. And in 2017, that's the trip that we went on. Some of the Hmong folks I know, and when Shoun reached out, and they're like, oh, a lot of Hmong Americans are coming. Did you want to join the Hmong American delegations there? I didn't know who else in the Hmong community was going, but, there's folks from Elk Grove, from Minnesota, folks from
Texas,
right? Yeah. And so I guess basically they invited the whole Hmong people around the world to go for this ceremony. It was like this migration ceremony where the Chinese wanted to commemorate a passing where they said, this is where you guys passed before you guys left China. And so they erected this stone, which is in Patala. And so that stone is still there. And so I invited Pachia and some of the younger Hmong folks, young professionals. But what's funny is that we went there and I was like, I work for the city. Pachia's doing her thing. We had a present, and then they called the younger folks. They're like, oh, you guys just go as students. I said, okay, we're students. But, I find that funny. But, and I'm not gonna tell
you were an official.
But in 2017, I think you
age gets us.
It was
Youngins still gotta earn their respects by the elders.
Right. But I think you learn so much about my experience was different. I just want to talk about like in my visit to Winshan or Batala in 2010 and then versus 2017. Because in 2010 when I went, like they literally had no economy. The main cash crop was tobacco. A lot of Hmong people were migrant workers, like the Sanyena, so like had to go from villages to the big cities to work. I think that's still a thing now, but they're earning living wages is way higher. And then we went in 2017, the whole economy changed. When we went in 2017, they have this big Hmong mall or shopping plaza where all the Hmong clothes were being made there. And, you know, you could trace the economy.
I think it was like a big mall, and then the section that we went to, specifically like 2 floors, was full of just Hmong clothing businesses.
Clothing, wholesale.
And you could see women with like mounds of textiles, like sewing. We wear now, and also that they wear in China.
Yeah, and what's interesting, they said, we're making this for you guys.
Yeah.
We built this and we sent it to Laos, and then you guys import it from Laos to Thailand to America. And you're like, oh, look at that connection. Like, you know, our Hmong American buying power really goes into all that region. Yeah, and so that was one of the economy there. The other economy was they weren't growing tobacco as much, but they were growing this ginseng root called sanci. And, you know, they're going ginseng, and that's something there. And so, like, you just see the development and change of the city, and you're like, oh, okay, China is really developing very well so far, you know, and it just piques your interest. And then you're like, okay, how can, you know, Hmong people here and Hmong people there foster a relationship to, you know, talk about our roots, our similarity? Because language is different. Our language is sort of different. Our clothing is different. Like, when you're there, you say, go ahead, Hmong Lang, they're like, oh, go ahead, Hmong Lang, you fall into the Hmong-shi branch. And you're like, wait, I never heard Hmong-shi before. And then there's the saying, Hmong-shi cai gong zai. They don't say Hmong Lang tun cai gong zai. They say Hmong-shi tun cai gong zai.
So for those, okay, I have to comment on this, because after Gumuka, or when I went to go learn all the different Hmong, like Hmong-shi, Hmong-pei, Hmong-do, yeah, in Patula, in Wenshan specifically, and then Kurakaloche, I came back home and I decided, oh, I'm gonna watch Nung Plai Lianza again. Because that's actually a very, that's a dunning that we share with a lot of Hmong Patula. You'll see that story engraved like in Pingbien. Like they have all of these murals of dunning na, and Nung Plai Lianza is one of those. And so I rewatched that movie and I just realized, my God, that's such a good movie. In the movie, they call Nzao, Mong Shi Dun Cai Gong Zao, right? And as a kid, obviously, I never caught that. But as an adult, I was like, wait a second. Mong Shi? I know what that is now. But, you know, if you don't know that Mong Shi is a type of Hmong, like Hmong Lang or Hmong Do, that'll just fly over your head. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so
back to your story.
Interesting connection. It's
interesting connection.
Like you would never know, like, unless you trace, like, you know, historical roots, migration.
Because in Laos, Chima Hmong Shila.
Yeah. In Laos, Hmong Dai, Hmong Lang, Hmong Jua.
That's it.
You know, and that's it. And so, then you go to China, you're like, okay, there's Hmong Pei, Hmong Sa, Hmong, other Hmong too, and then.
And every Hmong like has their own gutia.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And you know what's so cool about it? The same verses and rhymes that we use, they use too, but just in a different
Okay, my favorite part of our trip together was the boat ride.
Right.
We did this amazing boat ride. I literally felt like I was
in Chilpe, there's a lake, and you know, you guys ever go to Patala, there's another county called Chilpe County, and they have like this lake.
Beautiful lake. Okay, the mountains are the most beautiful mountains I've ever seen in my life. Literally looks like heaven. I'm sorry. But, and it's funny because we say when we die, we go to Patala to go reconnect with our ancestors in Patala. So for a lot of us too, like Patala is in our head is just like the idea of heaven.
Yeah.
But it's an actual place. Which I discovered when I went with you all to Patula, and I was like, "Oh, there's a real place called Patula." Whoa!
Yeah, don't joke to your friends like you're going to Patula. You're gonna die.
Yeah, if you say I'm going to Patula, that means I'm going to heaven. Like I'm going to die to go to heaven. But it's a real place. So that area, what is it called again? the lake.
Xiaobei. That's the county.
Xiaobei. Yeah, okay. The mountains and the lake is beautiful. There's like lotus flowers growing everywhere with the mountains in the background. And we were just on this beautiful boat ride and just singing back and forth with the boat behind us. And I felt like we were in like a Chinese classic movie, and it was so beautiful.
Because when we talk, our language communication was a little different. But when we sung, like, I don't know how I could say it, but when the folks that were with us,
Caroline, your
they
sister,
sung Kutia, and then the boat, behind us,
they heard us,
and they sung.
So they started singing to us, and then we were like singing back and forth. So literally,
they were communicating back.
Oh god, that was such a beautiful moment. But that's the thing, is like music is so powerful. Yeah. Our language is musical, and that's also something we've lost here. Honestly, we've lost it.
Yeah, so. I think our in China and Laos and Vietnam, like, you don't notice. Bei Chuking is saying something. Bei Haikusia, it's saying something. Bei Chonya, it's saying something. Bei Chota, it's saying something. Like, the person who's blowing it, they're literally telling you something. Either they're trying to court you, or they're saying something like so in Hmong culture, I think it's because we don't have a writing system that we communicate our feelings and our thoughts and our love through music.
Yeah, that makes me think about how, our parents never directly tell us they love us, and maybe like culturally we don't necessarily say I love you directly, because then we communicate it in these more subtle ways through music or through other forms of communication, which we don't have anymore among us youngins, and
that's where the identity crisis,
and that's where there's miscommunication and generation divide.
But that was our 2017 trip, and then wow, I did go to China a lot. And then
you did.
2019 was my last trip before the pandemic. And I was invited with the late Professor Ku Yang from CSU Stanislaus to join him.
I was invited too, but I couldn't go.
To join him on this trip to Guizhou.
Yeah. And
you don't know Guizhou. Guizhou is a province right next to Yunnan, Batala. And there's actually way more Hmong people in Guizhou, than in Yunnan. However, their language and our language is very different.
Interesting.
And there's other Hmong people there too that they don't call themselves Hmong. They call themselves Mu, Gadao, or Pachia. And the language is probably kind of similar, but it's very different. Like it's very hard to distinguish. But I think in 2019 when I went, I went to multiple villages and multiple areas, and I visited Xinjiang. Folks who live there, they call themselves Mu. And, if you're on YouTube, you see them on
most of the Miao you see are from Xinjiang in the Thousand Miao village. Yeah.
The big horns, the flashy silver, they're all from Xinjiang. And, it's that area, I don't know if you guys realize this, but it's being heavily promoted because of cultural tourism. Cultural tourism is one of the number one economy stimulator in Guizhou right now. And so Xinjiang has done such a great job that, and it's not even like cultural tourism from abroad, it's cultural tourism from China. Like the Han Chinese want to go see this Miao village. And so they go there. And so, they've reinvented like drinking ceremonies, they've invented like dancing ceremonies.
Which I got to experience.
Yeah. I did too. There was a video.
It's honestly very fun.
But I don't know where my video went. Did I take a video of you doing it too? No.
You go sit at these restaurants, or you go eat these beautiful huge feasts at the restaurants, and they have these beautiful girls dressed up in their traditional outfits, and they'll come singing songs, and then they'll bring you like wine, and they have this like really cool contraption where they put like they all hold cups. There's like 4 of them. They each and then they do like a waterfall for like each person, and then they feed you a piece of like meat after.
You'll get drunk.
It's really fun.
Yeah, but that's Xinjiang, and it's amazing because, you're like, wow, there's this Miao village or Hmong village, or they're not Hmong, but they're Mu.
It's quite cool. Well, that village in particular, it is a tourist site, so you can't just go there. You have to book ahead of time. And like they have a special bus that takes you there, so you come to the gates, and then the bus will like bus you into the village to your location. At least that's what we did when we got there. And so it was very it was very particular because they don't want it's such a huge tourist place that they don't want this large amount of tourism coming in. They're also trying to preserve the village as is. And when we say village, it's not like a Hmong village you see in Laos. It's it's very extravagant.
Yeah. So it's built with Douglas Chinese fir. So in America you have Douglas fir, the big trees, and that region is well known for Chinese fir. And fun facts. When they built the Forbidden City in Beijing in the 1600s,
they use the same wood?
They used the same wood. Like they said, we imported these wood from southern China in Guizhou. All these large Chinese fir. And you're like, wow.
It's very beautiful.
We played a role in building the Forbidden City.
It's very beautiful, yeah.
And, you connect the dots. Yeah, but it's very beautiful. The architecture is
it's very old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people might say, oh, they're Mu, they're not Hmong. But in their language, they call themselves Mu. In our language, we call ourselves Hmong. But
Hmong?
Yeah, so it's very similar, and it just might be a different dialect. Hmong Lang, Hmong Dao, right? Hmong Lang says Hmong, and the Hmong Dao says Hmong. It's very similar, but the H is there. And, I come thinking, it might just be that. So, it's very different, and that's that. But I visited there as a delegation, and I met a professor, and they talk about the development and all that, which we could share more. But and then I went to a Hmong village during that trip too, and it's called Zhanhuai, or it's called Hoshan and Zhanhuai in the northern part of Guizhou. And it was just all Hmong. They were Hmong. They're like, "Good Hmong, Bei Hmong," and you're like, "Oh, cool." And then they're like, brother, you guys have left us for 800 years. And
they said that to you?
Yeah, they're like, "We're so happy. Welcome home." And I'm like, "What?" And then they took me to this tree, and there's this is the tree that we separated. This was the tree where we
Tell
came
the story.
here.
Yeah. What's the tree?
So the tree is, I think they call it a money tree, but it might be it's burned down now. And I think you Paint in the 90s did a video on it, and it was really cool. But to see it in person in 2019, it was awesome, and it was just cool. Really, where you come from, because they're Hmong.
But what is the tree
So technically, the story was the tree was a place marker where the Hmong people, when they came to Guizhou, because we are not indigenous to Guizhou, that region. There was another minority, but we eventually became the majority in that area. But then when we came there, they said it was the separation of the Hmong people. Some people choose to stay there, and some people choose to leave. And according to them, we were the ones who left. So they were the ones who stayed in that region. And they're like, yeah, welcome home. This is 800 years of separation. Let's see if our language has any similarity. And so they did give me CDs.
And these are the ones who call themselves Hmong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's they gave me CDs. They hai Kusia, they hai Lusa and all that. But they sung their song. Mostly it's similar to Hmong Green Hmong, but it's very different. I read a study, I don't know who wrote it, but it might be Hmong studies, about the comparison between the Hmong languages in the Honghe region, which is in Batala in that region,
Red River,
and a community in Chiang Mai, right, and the Hmong language, and they said, we are considered Western Hmong. We are the Western Miao, and within the Western Miao branch, our dialects more than green and white. I mean, in Guizhou, they have over maybe 25 different dialects, and it's all intelligible. It doesn't even make sense. Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't have any mutual
Oh, it's not mutually intelligible. Some of their dialects.
Yeah, but they do call themselves Hmong. We all call ourselves Hmong,
including Jiangmu.
No. Mu is separate. The Eastern dialect.
Oh, so you're talking about Western dialects
We're talking about Western.
In Guizhou?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's 20 Western dialects in Guizhou?
Probably more, but...
Wow.
And so they're...
That's weird because, they're in the East.
Yeah.
Okay, that's funny.
No. They're in the East.
They're in the East, but they're the Western dialect. Yeah.
No, because they're still considered the West. Western Guizhou. They're in Western Guizhou.
Okay,
See, the East is on Eastern Guizhou, and the central one is in central China, which is weird. Yeah.
I Didn't know that.
Yeah, so
Okay, okay,
would
that's
be-
another layer I need to look
Yeah,
into.
so we have 3 type of Miao categories. Central Miao, which
Right.
is Jiaoxiong in Hunan and Hubei. And then there's the
Eastern Miao,
Eastern Miao. There's
which are
2 different dialects, which is the Mu and the Ganao. And then there's the Western dialect,
which is
the rest.
yeah. Well, I mean that makes sense that there's like 20, and because there are a lot of Hmong and we cannot understand them. Yeah.
And so there's like the white horn Miao, the big horn Miao. There's like the flowery Miao, 4 square Miao. All that like Hmong à có một chữ là the Bay Hmong, but when you talk, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
We just all understand Bay Hmong now, okay?
Yeah, and so but this place in Zhanhuai, Hoshan Mountain, Hoshan Village, it's really cool because it's like, wow, there's more research that needs to be done.
Oh yeah.
And it's actually in Zhonyi County, which is if you tie that into the development of modern China, Zhonyi County is where the CCP stopped the long march there, and that is where Mao Zedong took the helm of the Communist Party. And you go there and you realize the majority of Hmong people there, you're like, we have to play a role in this. And they said we did. The Hmong people played a major role in helping the CCP during the Long March to navigate through mountainsides and flee from the KMT, the Kuomintang, which is Chiang Kai-shek's group. And so a lot of the CCP do love the Hmong people because we play a role in saving the party and helping them create the modern China it is today. So we are part of the forefathers of creating modern China too, because and so in Zhonyi there's like this museum where they have like the villages. They have like a commemoration of where Chairman Mao took over the helm of the Communist Party. And so much history like to uncover, multi liquor, China's #1 liquor, right? The CCP or the Chinese government said that's the national liquor of China. And it comes from Guizhou, it comes from Zhanhuai, Hoshan, and they say it's Chinese, but
it's Miao.
It might come from Miao origins. I can't say it's Miao or Hmong, but you could say it comes from an area with Miao origin because it's in that region.
And I actually started watching I started watching Space Force. And the Chinese general in there brought multi liquor from China, and I was like, "Oh, Miao liquor from Guangzhou." Sorry.
Yeah, so it's Chinese liquor. It's not Miao liquor.
Yes,
but there's an off brand called San Miao,
and it's written in Miao. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Miao of that too. But it's like interesting, and Multi is like a $500 billion company. It's like super, super wealthy.
Well, I mean, all these points are super interesting, right? Because it really makes us like stop and think and reconsider our history and like where we come from.
And this is like going beyond Laos, right? This is beyond being Tossing, Kietong. This is beyond, Saki. This is beyond that. And it's like...
But even taking it beyond that, like you for me, then I start to wonder, like, okay, what does it mean to be Chinese then? What does it mean to be Hmong? And for me, like these greater like ideas of like citizenship, like being a global citizen, start coming to my mind because we rest in so many places and we find our history in so many places, in Laos, in Thailand, in Vietnam, now in China, now in America. For me, that's just like, it's just very interesting to now look at this multifaceted identity, and not just a very like narrow identity of like, this is Hmong or
Through my travels, like, I'm not saying like Hmong don't face racial discrimination. We do in all these nations, but there's always that opportunity to grow beyond it and connect. I think if we could connect.
I think starting here also helps us to build a more powerful identity.
Right, yeah.
A more united and powerful identity to look at how resourceful we are, or just like what an impact we make in the communities that we live in.
The world. Hmong people, we are resilient. Everywhere we go, we survive, we adapt. And the best thing is, we're proud. We keep our identity.
And I think that's important to note, especially being such a young community in America, and then not having access to like these other places where we come from. it's important for us to know that history, to also feel empowered, and to know like where we come from and the things we've accomplished as a group of people. I think that's really powerful. This conversation for me just piques my interest. Like there's more to be done. And I think a lot of times like you really have to just learn through travel. When you travel and you talk to people and you see things, like you make those connections that were always like right in front of you, but you just never like realized.
I think for Hmong, for me being Hmong and being interested in like Hmong history, Hmong scholarly work, you really have to be there. And for me, I'm not a Hmong scholar. I'm just this is a hobby of mine.
One day he will be our Hmong scholar.
Maybe, but then I like in college, when I asked my Chinese professors and all that, they always wave me off like, "Why are you interested in male history? Like, just do this."
Which is sad, honestly.
Which is kind of sad, and you're like, okay, we probably didn't play a role in the development of China or anything, but being there and meeting Hmong people from this region, and you're like, wait, I learned about the Long March. It never said that it came through Guizhou and Zhengyi. I didn't know that there was Hmong villages in Zhengyi, Hoshan, Zhenhua. I didn't know none of this. And then the Hmong people there would laugh and smile. They're like, we still got 3 guys who's still alive. Go talk to them.
Oh,
they can share you their experience. And you're like, wow, like, okay, these are stories
but
that
this is how we get written out of stories and out of history. And this is why it's so important for us as educated people with the privilege to travel and write and learn to document these things before they disappear.
Yeah, when I was in China, right, I think a lot of Hmong Americans don't know, but there was the Sino-Viet War, right? The Sino-Viet War was in 1979.
I was going to say, like, in the 80s.
Yeah. Did you know that Vietnam had a third war against the colonizer, which was China? And
those tensions are still there in those regions.
And
very
when you're there,
apparent,
you know who lives in those regions?
Hmong people.
They live, right?
Yeah, I felt that there.
And then Sapa, Lao Chai, Hanzhang, all those area in northern Vietnam were invaded by the Chinese, and it was basically
Hmong Chinese
invading Vietnamese Hmong, and that conflict.
But it's not written that way.
Yeah, it's not written that way. That conflict divided.
I think the identities of the people aren't necessarily like written down. It's just the country.
Yeah, it's just the country. Because really, if I'm Hmong and I served in the American military, I'm an American. I go to Iraq. I'm an American.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not Hmong. Yeah. And my contribution there is to America. Yeah.
But the complexities of these histories are so like important to document too, especially if we're talking about our own communal history.
Yeah. Because Hmong people, I think when it comes to, and we're gonna wrap it up with like identity, right? Why do we want to be Hmong? Why do we grasp to be Hmong? And like people always tell me like in America, like, Shoun, why don't you just say you're Asian American? Why do you keep saying I'm Hmong and all that? But it's like, because you guys can say you're Asian American because you guys don't need to hold on to Korean traditions.
You have an entire country.
You have an entire country.
With all these museums and your history gets
for me what
is it, like verified or like it gets like
for me I can't let go being Hmong because I let it go and I become an American. And when people ask my children, hey, you're an Asian American, but what's your ancestors or where do you guys come from? And they can't say they're Hmong. They just say, oh, we're just Asian Americans. You see, it's tough. But for other, I think API group, just say, I'm Korean. And they say, you don't know it. Well, there's the country Korea. Let's go visit it. That's an easy exit. For us, we don't. We never get to the point. And then there will be folks who will be like, oh, how come you're Asian American and you don't know what type of Asian you are? Then you'll be like, what? Like, And so that's always the challenges, and that always piqued my interest. It's like, okay, I'm Hmong, and this is why I study Hmong, or I'm interested in learning about Hmong people all around the world.
I think as a researcher, like, it's always hard to, I was looking for the word earlier, like, validate. It's always hard to validate why Hmong history or Hmong-focused studies is important. Like, I'll explain things to professors and to people, and they'll be like, well, why are you only doing it on Hmong people? And it's like, well, there's 10 million of us in the world, and we don't have a country.
Right.
And we don't have any large institutions who freaking cares about us.
Right.
And so, and so it is important. And and it's hard because we have to validate ourselves and continuously support one another in this in this ongoing search and in this ongoing discovery. And we are a minority within minorities. Actually, Asians aren't minorities in the world.
Asians aren't. We're the majority in the world. So
I think
we're the super minorities.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my takeaway. And then maybe we can just end our podcast here. There's so much more to be said, but we can cover it in the future. So
follow us, subscribe to us, and ask us questions, comments. Again, we are Hmong-ish, a podcast produced by Hmong American Media, sponsored by the Hope Center and Hmong's
Culture Through Cloth. And check us out again and let us know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.